Hey everyone, Phreak here. New year, new patch rundown also. Look at that. New shoes. They look cool. TFT themed. Very awesome. Anyway, 10.1 is here, and based on my knowledge, this should be the opening patch of basically every pro league, LCS included. So exciting stuff. Let's get into it. 10.1 is essentially extended follow-up of preseason. Nothing too gigantic, but I tend to like most of the changes. Let's get into it. 10.1 is here, and it starts out with Set coming out. Set looks really cool. Excited about the champion. Spotlight should be out pretty soon, so cool stuff. Let's talk about Aphelios. Aphelios, not Aphelios. He's a fella, so Aphelios. That's how to remember it. He's a fella. All right, so 5 move speed and 30 health less, as well as the R doing less empowered AoE damage on the flamethrower version of the ultimate. So what does 30 health mean? It means some. He was actually already a fairly squishy champion. His armor goes up to the low 80s. His MR is actually under 30. And his health doesn't even reach 2,000 and it starts at only 500, which is very, very low. Aphelios is definitively squishy. By every metric I can look at, he is definitely a squishy champion. He doesn't have a dash, doesn't have any bonus movement speed. That said, we can clearly see from his actual gameplay, the champion is definitely too strong. So does need power down, but again, do kind of want to point out that he does not have good self-peel. He does not have good escape tools. Numbers are certainly too high, but you know, this is what I'll call them Jinx-esque champions are going to kind of do. When they do well, they're going to look like they one-shot everything, because the only way for them to look weak is to be killed, right? This isn't Tristana or Caitlyn or something where they get away from stuff. This is a champion who doesn't get away, so he either instantly dies or he kills you. And he's too strong, so he just kills you. This is kind of the interesting quandary, I guess, you get in with champs without escapes. Like Misfortune is like a 98% pick ban in pro in the offseason, looking at Kespa Cup and the LPL version of that, which I'm blanking on. Demacia Cup, which is like 98% presence, just barely behind a Kali who is 100%. Like, randomly no escape champion or no escape marksman just like become the best champion in the game, and we just have to deal with it. As kind of more of a random aside than anything else, but you know, kind of worth pointing out that anyway, these changes should do some to knock down Aphelios. Again, he's more catchable. All right, I mean, now he has the lowest base movement speed in the game, not counting Janna, which is a fraudulent example in the first place, and the lowest base durability in the game, basically, not counting Sona, which is a fair counterexample. The counterplay to Aphelios is just kill the guy, and so I actually like, by the way, that this is the decision that's being made, right? Is they are continuing to ramp up the weakness of you can kill this idiot. Probably going to end up still too strong. I don't think this nerf is big enough to knock him down from being OP, but you should have some better recourse on the playing against side. Let's move on. Spent a long time talking about 30 health and 5 move speed. This obviously matters as well, of course, the splash damage not being as absurd. Okay, Aurelion Sol, I didn't know exactly what levels this changed in, but it's some damage down. Aurelion Sol, definitely another very strong champion. Incredibly high win rate. Does need nerfs. Probably needs more nerfs than this, but we'll see what happens as time goes on. Next up is Azir. I do want to point out that there seemed to be, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but there was some non-linear scaling on the ultimate here, right? Plus 100, plus 200 afterwards, so that got smoothed out with 25 more damage at rank 1, 25 more damage at rank 3, and 75 more damage at rank 2, as well as 2 more seconds of wall duration. Now, I've seen a lot of chatter about, like, you know, low presence in pro play last year. Like, Azir's presence in pro was pretty much carried by about a 2-month chunk in the middle, and was the number 6 overall mid laner. Still very reasonably high, but this is a champion who has never been able to sit at 50% solo queue win rate while being absurd in pro. So I think it is reasonable to consistently try to put Azir in a spot where he's like the number 3 or 4 mid laner, because that's like, I wouldn't want him to sit at number 1, right? That's we've been there. It's annoying. I don't want that. But if Azir's sitting at number 3 or 4, that's as much power as you can get him to like try to raise the solo queue win rate to be playable. Like right now, Azir's at like 47 and change, which is roughly the best Azir has ever been in solo queue. So, you know, every year or so, the designers like get a little bit farther and a little bit closer in getting Azir's solo queue and pro presence to match. They're getting a little bit closer and a little bit closer. In this case, it's like, well, here's just some strict power that, you know, it'll add another 0.5% win rate, maybe 1% win rate. Maybe he gets like 48% in solo queue, which is shocking to get to 48. But hey, if he gets to 48 and isn't taking over pro, that's, I would say, incredible work. Long time coming, but in general, I like these changes. They shouldn't be so big that Azir takes over pro. That's the dream. That's the hope. Also, we have the actual data table here, right? 30% bump at the middle ranks, as you can see. Cool. Again, not a gigantic change. Corki R damage up by 0, 10, 20. Also want to point out, by the way, that Corki has a total AD ratio on the ultimate, which means it scales simply on character level in and of itself. So, you know, it's not really 140 to 160. It's 200 to 220. So the buff is maybe not as big as you might think. It's still, you know, 0, 10, 20 flat damage. That number is still doubled when it's the big one. Like, this is still relevant. He uses this ability a lot. It's it's still a big deal for him. But again, not as gigantic as you might think. Nice to have, cool to see. Go Corki. Again, another champ that doesn't seem to be taking over anywhere too absurd. So, okay to see small buffs here. It's another, here's a 1% win rate buff because his champion is underperforming in solo queue and has room to get buffed without taking over pro, which I think is fine. Next up is Jax. R now works with Ginsu's Rageblade properly, so you might see that go into his build a little bit more often. I know a lot of the Jax builds right now are much tankier. You have things like Trinity Force and Wit's End into just outright tankiness. There's variations on a theme, obviously, but like that's the kinds of things you're seeing. Rageblade being 3,300 gold and 0 durability is obviously sometimes hard to buy for a melee champion not named Master Yi, but that's still the world we live in, and we'll see how it goes. Maybe it'll work out for him. Jayce, another champion. I'm going to control F for Jayce here. And he's at 46.5% win rate in solo queue, right? Very, very low. We weren't seeing him much in pro at all, neither at Worlds nor from what I can tell in the offseason tournaments. So there is room to buff him. I'm glad they're not buffing level 1 of the ability. Certainly, he's still going to get the points in pretty soon. I mean, at level 3 of the champion, level 5 of the champion, you've still got this, but it's only 10 damage on the Q. So it's, a pretty reasonable amount of sort of mid to late game damage buff, which seems fine. I mean, he will still be well below 50%. He's still going to be quite the underperformer as far as general solo queue power is concerned. But, again, I can support buffs like this because I can see the champion is statistically underperforming for most players. So sure, why not buff him? That seems fine. There's a lot of changes like this, right? That are not a whole ton of things going on. It's just, hey, small buffs, cool. Another one that I like, actually, quite a bit here is Kalista. Again, I will sort of point out that I've seen comments online where it feels really bad to be slowed and have your hops, be really stupid, where you're sitting there, like, doing the slow motion back pedal, waiting to land so your DPS suffers because you're moving. Yep, that definitely sucks, right? That feels really bad, and I wouldn't mind seeing a change that, can constrain the hop duration, right? I would generally like that, but right now, it's not happening. What is happening, though, is Kalista is having a hard time mid to late game team fights. She can throw a Q, but otherwise needs to sit there auto-attacking during a team fight. And her range isn't that high, and she doesn't really have great dashing tools, so let's just make her tankier. I think the logic is sound. I think it makes sense. This seems totally doable. I still want to see if we can get into a world where Kalista can make her passive work normally and not only get 90% of the AD she buys. Like, I would like to see that change. But hey, we're not there yet, so oh well, here we are. Kalista's instead a bit tankier. And this is pretty solid, right? It's pretty hard to buy outright health, and especially pretty hard to buy outright armor on an AD carry. Like, yes, you could buy a Chain Vest and go GA. Yes, you can buy Ninja Tabby, but like, I still hate Ninja Tabby on squishies. I think it's still a garbage item. So she's just a lot tankier. And I think that's pretty solid. So actual health values up quite a lot, right? By endgame, 9%. This is a very substantial buff. Would have liked to see her base health get flattened out a little bit while we're here. I mean, it could have even gone down if you really wanted to, because her early landing phase is still solid. Again, really, really minor quibble. But, like, you know, while you're there and you made a nice clean 100, why not get a multiple of 5? Again, really doesn't matter. It's really whatever. But hey, it goes up to 2,234 HP. That is a very large number. That is a lot of health. She has standard ranged champion MR, so 30 plus 0.5. And now gets a lot of armor, right? 83 is a pretty middling armor value. 91 is very high for ranged. And again, this is because Kalista is, you know, not high range. She certainly is range. Like, she's certainly not in melee range of a Maokai, but she is in point-and-click CC range of every champion in the game when auto-attacking them, and doesn't have good ways of getting out of that. So, you know, I think sort of pattern-wise, her being more durable than normal makes total sense. This is fine with me. Do want to point out that because of the way the stat skew works, that she's you know, tanky-ish to magic damage, but very tanky to physical. Like, Kalista is theoretically good against AD assassins, like, via her stat profile, right? So that when Zed buys his third lethality item, well, she's still got 30 armor left over, which is more than you can save for that Orianna. I don't think her weakness is really to assassins. So, like, you know, there's some, like, diving almost too much into it where you're like, but why does she need more than 80 armor? But it's not really that important overall. It's not a huge deal. Overall, she's got a big health bar. This will definitely help her mid to late game team fighting, right? 14% more durable against physical damage. That means if you are just, like, dueling a Caitlyn in the mid to late game, I mean, that's like 1 or 2 extra auto attacks that she has to deal to you, which is definitely meaningful. So again, pretty solid amount of durability gained here. You know, very high end of durability for a marksman, and I think rightly so based on how her role works. So you know, I like when base stats generally align with champion role, but I mean, certainly her stats are very, very high. 2200 for range is obviously, like, quite high. Next up, 5 move speed off of Kassadin. And a change that I can claim credit for. I'm not saying I'm the first person to ever think of this, but I remember playing, I think, anyway, I was playing League, and then I was like, hey, you know what? I really wish Kassadin. It was funny, like, I played Kassadin, and then, like, later that day played Kog'Maw in an ARAM. And ran into both these things. So it's like, wait a second, why do I have to, like, look at this very tiny icon among 15 other icons in my buff bar for when my mana cost is going to reset? We have this tech to show you durations on the ability itself. Just show it on my R tooltip itself, on the R, like, spell icon itself. So Kassadin and Kog'Maw, I suggested it to, like, the, like, live gameplay team at large, and they're like, yeah, sure, can do, and it's in the next patch. So this is a change that I caused. Hashtag gloat. Cool stuff. But yeah, 5 move speed off Kassadin. Again, Kassadin is very overpowered, absurdly strong champion. 5 move speed will not stop Kassadin from being overpowered. It will matter. He is going to be worse at walking away from ganks. He'll be worse at roaming pre-ultimate. There is some difference here. It does matter. It just only matters so much, and the end result will still be that Kassadin is incredibly strong. That's not going away. Usability to Kog'Maw. There is some chance this has, like, a real gameplay impact in just, like, helping players play better. I mean, probably not, but, like, there's a chance it goes up a tiny bit. A chance. Probably not, though. All right, next up is Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser is definitely overpowered. Definitely overpowered. Oh my, is Mordekaiser overpowered. What a strong champion. So 1 second off the duration, and at levels 6 and onwards, he gets less move speed out of the passive. So this part is pretty small, to be fair. So here is the move speed difference. It's 3 and 6% lower. Shocking, I know. But okay, hey, nice to see. You know, it's better. That's good. But this is deceptively good, right? Because this only refreshes when you land a real spell or land an auto attack on your opposition. Sometimes they can kite you out long enough to turn this off. So this is deceptively meaningful. Now, in a lot of cases, it's not going to matter. In a lot of cases, you got them stuck in it the whole time anyway. So, well, sorry, Bard, I landed E, so you died. And you can't get away because you were ulted. That will still happen. That's going to exist. But there's going to be some value in being able to say, hey, well, you know what? I managed to bust a shot him away. That 1 extra second actually mattered. The passive turned off, and I got to get away. It wasn't that nice. Similarly, you can get in situations where, he's just trying to wave clear. He trades with you, and you run away, and then he gets to knock down the whole minion wave. And now he gets 1 less second of DPS in the minion wave, and that can matter as well. All right, so what's next up? It's Nami. Nami is next up. Okay, so cool change. I like this overall. I think it's fun. Now her E affects abilities. Now she gets to buff champions to deal extra damage and slow with their spells, which is cool. I think it's really interesting. So, I don't know. Cassiopeia slows with her E now, and you do cool stuff. Or Azir's soldiers can stab for some slowing and whatnot. I think it's just a cool change. I'm glad to see little pieces of changes that make more supports friend agnostic, right? It's like, well, I mean, what am I trying to say, right? It's just like, hey, there's going to be more mages viable bot lane. I think that's cool. And, yeah, it does AoE abilities empowered by Technological Blessing deal, a bunch less damage to non-champions. So, you buff up a Ziggs Q and it deals 12 more damage to the caster minions. Yeah, it's not huge, but hey, sometimes it'll matter, right? But I want to point out, right, AoE to non-champions. So, like, if you buff Karthus, I mean, it probably just applies 1, 2, 3, and they're not really AoE. But, like, I don't know, True Shot Barrage should only go once, I think, right? Like, that seems kind of interesting. Like, what does a Caitlyn Q do with this? Chunk the entire wave and then slow the enemy champion? Like, there's some cool stuff out there, right? That even marksmen care about. That I think is going to be interesting. So I think this will be cool. Looking forward to it. Go Nami. Next up, the continued bounce up and down of Sejuani, getting stronger, getting weaker, getting stronger, getting weaker, getting stronger again. Here's the health growth going back up to 100. I've seen this change before. There's the numbers, 3 to 4% higher. Want to point out, Sejuani has, I believe, less health than Kalista. Okay, slightly more. 2234, 2260. So, as much health as Kalista. Kalista's real tanky. But there's other changes that I actually do want to actually discuss and bring about. So, one benefit that I get by being on some of the email distros is I can see other versions of the context statements and other versions of why the designers are making the changes they make. And so there's some extra context here I think is really interesting. So one thing they do a lot is they hard track pro builds to say, okay, well, people are, we nerf Sejuani's health per level, and so now they have to buy Knight's Vow before they go Warmogs. Yep, they're buying Knight's Vow or Righteous Glory before Warmogs now. Okay, so that's happening. It's well, okay, we can give that back to them by going back to 100 health, whatever, sure. But one thing they also do is, again, they say, well, all the pro builds are buying pure HP. They're just going Cinder Hulk into Warmogs every single time. And they're just really stacking HP on Sejuani. Whereas non-pros are more likely to buy Frozen Heart or Thornmail or Randuin's Omen or whatever. And so they're buffing stuff that non-pros use. Because Sejuani is a 46% win rate solo queue champion who's incredibly popular in pro play. Even if she does get, even if she's nerfed out of pro play viability, she's still 46%. So you have to buff her a lot before she's okay in solo queue, and at some point in between then and point A and point B, she's gonna take over as pro again. So they're like, hey, what can we buff that only non-pros use to make her win rate not crap? So this isn't gonna affect challenger Sejuani, but again, if Sejuani's in pro, she's in challengers, who cares? This is for plat Sejuani and silver Sejuani who need the help. So I like this. It's well, if you're going to do a non-typical build, it's okay, you're rewarded. And I want to point out, by the way, that the math here of Frost Armor tells you that building armor and MR is good, right? It's actually very easy to tell if an ability wants you to build armor and MR or not. If it's 10 armor and 10% bonus armor, it's agnostic. Done. Like, that's literally it, right? Is if the flat value is the same number as the percentage, it's equal. And as soon as it goes one way or the other, it tells you whether or not you want to buy armor and MR. So it was already in the case that this passive told you buying armor MR was efficient because you only got a flat 10, but you got a 35% bonus. So Sejuani scales very, very well with buying things like Chain Vest plus Negatron Cloak, build it together, active gives you a bunch of HP, Stone Plate. Now she's even better at building things like Stone Plate and Thornmail and Ninja Tabby and whatnot. So still scales very heavily with buying armor MR. Should still be something you really think about when you're building stuff out. Alrighty. Other than that, want to point out the other half of this, which is the Permafrost buff, getting extra 10 damage per rank up here. Again, want to point out that this isn't intended to be the ability you max second. But what they noticed is that the win rate difference between Q max second and E max second was very large, and that a lot of people were still doing E max second. Even though there wasn't a good reason to do it, it was being done quite a bit. And so I said, you know what? They're not trying to change behavior, although some people will probably switch over and they'll be wrong. But for the people who were maxing E second, well, just take 40 damage. Like this is the kind of thing that will just like passively buff Sejuani win rate and will not affect pro in any way because they're still going to max Q second. But for like the 1/4 or 1/3 of people who do the wrong ability, it's less wrong now. And I personally love changes like that. In fact, I would actually love to see like further changes to like every champion in the game to try to make more and more of these abilities as flat as possible. I mean, not as flat as like to make the difference between max order as flat as possible. Because if the win rate difference is essentially 0, you now have a real choice in what you want to max. And that's a good thing. Like, I probably wouldn't mind what an E max Sejuani looks like. She's burstier. Okay, that's probably okay. So that's the kind of stuff like I would like to see. I think it's cool. I think it's good. This is a small step towards that, but I mean, I wouldn't mind like a random preseason patch where like 120 champions get buffs to the abilities they max last. Just to see it. But whatever. This is very minor, as I pointed out. I mean, she will remain well below 50% in solo queue. Should be a reasonably viable tank in pro play, right? You're back to being able to go Warmog second item and turn that on pretty reasonably, so should be doable. Looks fine. Next up is Shyvana. Shyvana got kind of left out in the cold with the preseason changes, of course. Not getting to do anything off the Cloud Drake. Kind of unlucky, so here you go. Fury gains go up by 10% per one. Looking at her actual solo queue win rate, 49%, not terrible. Doesn't need a whole lot to be in a good spot, at least for solo queue. Shyvana tends to not be really a pro viable jungler anyway, so I don't think they're ever going to really be targeting that, so who cares? But this is a champion who, like, people do a bunch of different builds on. Like, we've seen AP Shiv, we've seen on-hit Shiv. Some people still go Cinderhulk Shiv. That one's wrong. But, you know, even despite people doing a bunch of different builds and some of them obviously being bad, 49% is pretty reasonable. So Shyvana is like basically playable and like I think generally a fine champion. Doesn't need a ton of help, but you know, can be buffed, and so sure, here we are. Fury buff, that's cool. Do want to point out that mathematically this is still weaker than a 10% CDR drop. Because think about the fact that like going from, you know, 13 to 14 Fury per auto attack. This is not the real numbers, but just bear with me, right? Going from 13 to 14 Fury per auto attack is a buff of 1/13 more Fury generation. But if you had, let's say, a 100-second cooldown ultimate and it went from 70 to 60 seconds, you got 1/7 off the cooldown, right? So you get 1/13 more Fury versus 1/7 off the cooldown. So like, hey, it's nice to be here now. And it doesn't really matter, like, at the end of the day, who actually cares. It's not a big enough deal to, like, do any more finicky stuff here. But technically, 4th Cloud Drake is the best Cloud Drake, and for Shyvana, the 1st Cloud Drake's the best Cloud Drake. whatever. Again, really minor stuff. Doesn't matter a whole lot. The other interesting part is, hey, her E does more damage. This is like your E itself does damage, then you auto attack it, and you get bonus damage on hit because of it. In this case, you get 0.5% of their max HP more, and against really high health monsters, you can do up to 50 more damage via the cap. So here's the damage difference, right? Target health between 2,500 and 4,500. How much damage it used to do, how much damage it does now. Right, it's a 50% damage increase, obviously, to go from 3.25 to 3.75. That's 15%, and then going from 100 to 150 is obviously 50%. So you're somewhere between 15 and 50%. And the old sort of break point where you'd hit 100 damage was 3,077 health. Right, so you have 15% more damage in every case where they have less than 3,077 health. If they have less than 3077, it is a 15% damage bump. If the jungle monster you're hitting has more than 3077 health, then it approaches 50% more damage. And as you can see, once a target has 4,000 health, you're getting the full plus 50 damage per auto attack. And like, very high health things like dragons and red buffs and blue buffs have health bars about this high. And here you go. You're getting 50 extra damage per auto attack, which definitely quite meaningful. So this really does a lot to her ability to kill Dragon and kill Baron when the time arises, which, to be fair, really does seem to be the Shyvana playstyle, is turbo farm your jungler, then go solo a big objective. And she is better at that thing, which seems good. There's a decent chance this bumps her about 50%. Shyvana should be in a pretty good spot next patch. Next up, I'm going to call it a remaster to Sylas. Huge changes to basically every ability on the kit. Okay, so essentially, health, armor, and MR all went down at level 1 and up at level 18. So here's that data table. Actual health breaks even by level 5, obviously scales up. 2,400 health, by the way. I mean, look at this health per level, 115. This is the biggest health bar in the game. Outright, definitely true. This guy is yoked on a health perspective. This is incredibly tanky. I don't necessarily mind breaking convention with this kind of stuff. It's just like a little surprising how truly outstandingly durable he is. And then we can go further and say, okay, but the armor and MR changes obviously matter. So he has equal durability against physical damage starting at level 6. It goes up to 20% more durable against physical damage. For magic damage, it's somewhat similar. Breaks even at 7. 14% more durable against magic damage at 18. So if you get this guy to late game, he is absolutely absurdly tanky. I mean, this is reasonably high armor growth, gets him pretty close to 100. I mean, this is very high MR growth, gets him among the highest in the game. This is a very tanky champion at baseline. And I want to point out, he still has that W that heals him, and it heals him more when he gets low. So this is a very durable bruiser. Now, keep in mind, we have all kinds of champions that are really durable. You have Echo, who has like a 500-point shield in the mid game that he, puts on himself. And if you get him low, he ults back in time and gains all his health back, right? And Echo is, I mean, certainly can be frustrating, but like manages to be a successful champion, even with, almost frustrating levels of durability for how much damage he deals. And Echo was basically fine. So, you can do this and it's okay, right? Because Sylas doesn't have, I would say, the same kinds of defensive tools Echo has. This is me spitballing on like, hey, is it okay for him to be this tanky? And I think, yeah, it's okay for him to be this tanky. Okay, so the passive has less range. This isn't listed here, but almost every single ability on his kit had an auto attack reset, and they're all gone. So instead of auto attack resetting, he gets a bunch of attack speed. So attack speed instead of resets. Range is lower, or the radius is lower. Damage is slightly higher. Executes minions, and you get a third stack available. So you can stack up 3 versions of this, right? And it's at high attack speed, so it's chunk in pretty quick succession. This is all, I would say, generally to lower the skill ceiling on Sylas, to make high power Sylas more reachable. And I think that is fine. Especially for a champion that is so absurdly good in pro and unplayable in solo queue. I'm going to look at Sylas' solo queue win right now, and it is 45%. Like, Sylas is out Azeering Azir. that's when you know you've got some problems, right? So you think back to all the Azir changes over the last several years. They're trying to un-Azir Sylas, like they un-Azired Azir. I mean, same for Ryze. Ryze, I mean, made huge headway in the same vein. So I mean, I think this is a good change. I'm glad these kinds of changes are happening. They're trying to truncate a little bit here, right? They're not going full Garen, and by the way, Garen also gets played in Pro, so go figure. But I think these are good changes that go in the right direction. So okay, he is squishier in the early game, tankier in the late game. His passive is no longer playing around auto attack resets, and you can stack up 3 at a time so that you can like do a full combo and then just like hit, and that's okay. I think that's totally cool, right? Because optimal play is still optimal play, but weaker play at least can do things. I think that's fine. Again, losing attack resets can, obviously remove some of the ceiling, but even, raising the floor a little bit I think is fine too. All right. So the passive, no attack resets, but more attack speed, more damage overall. And I want to point out, by the way, one thing is that this can theoretically strictly raise DPS, because it wasn't like your attack reset meant you attacked 3 times instantly. You had to finish your spell animation, and every spell has at least a quarter second to cast it, which means you would attack, do a quarter second animation, and then start your new windup, right? Which means, and we'll go into this in a second. I can go to it right now, actually, his attack speed. This was his attack speed before as a champion, right? And it's not like anyone built attack speed on Sylas. So if you're looking at, let's actually pick really late game. Let's pick level 17 or something. You would hit, and then within 1 second, you would hit again if you did nothing at all. Here, you hit, and then you have to take a quarter second to cast a spell, and then you still have to get through whatever portion of the windup needed to happen. Let's call it, I don't know, a quarter second as well. I'm not really sure. Really, that meant he was attacking twice per second under optimal gameplay. That's probably about right? That if you're doing optimal gameplay, you roughly doubled his attack speed. That's probably close to accurate. In this case, you're just always getting, about 40%. Well, I mean, in the early game is 60%, but, mid to late game goes, 50 to 40% more attack speed. So, you are certainly not going to hit as fast as if you had attack resets, but you are roughly going halfway to closing the gap. Just like for some numbers out there. I'm not really passing like commentary on like this makes him stronger, really. At least not for high-skilled Sylases, because I don't think it does make him stronger for high-skilled Sylases. But you're not losing all of it, right? You're getting a fair bit of it back. Again, looking at like what his actual attack speed looks like after the fact, and it's pretty good, right? It's over 1 attack per second, even from the very, very start. Pretty good. All right, so reshape the passive. What's next? Well, the Q is different. You cannot cast Q during E2. Q2 no longer slows. Q1 slows, but Q2 doesn't. But you can't go to land the stun. Okay, it landed. Start the Q. You have to rely on Q1 slow to land Q2. That's going to be a consistency loss. I don't believe your E stun lasts long enough to guarantee both halves of Q without allowing flash or something. So you're going to miss some Q2s you weren't going to before. But again, Q1 still slows. All right. Cooldown increased by 1 second. And damage was changed around. Overall AP ratio is still 1.2. Total damage we'll get into. Total minion damage we'll get into. So cooldown 1 second longer, 11 to 20%. Okay, cool. Move on. Max Q damage is up 10 to 50. 10 to 50 flat damage added to the Q if you can land both halves. If you only on the first half, by the way, damage goes down, right? First half damage went down by 5 to 45. Second half damage went up by 15 to 100. So substantial changes there. Overall damage, if you get both halves, again, quite a bit higher. The overall AP ratio to champions is identical. The big difference is the minion damage fall off comes out to this equation, 92% less, 92% of the damage at rank 1, 87% of the damage at rank 5. Extra point being that the AP ratio, because so much of it is in the back half, which has the reduction on it, is only 3/4 as good against minions. So his late game wave clear is definitively weaker. His early game wave clear barely touched. And I want to point out that, again, the ability does technically more damage and executes minions. So his early game wave clear is better, and his late game wave clear, maybe you miss some breakpoints at some point. But, like, this is a pretty big deal. Pretty big deal. It is almost impossible to fail to last hit under a turret, right? If a turret hits a thing once and you attack something nearby, like any caster minion, you will do your, like, I don't know, 30 AoE damage and then do the other 25 there. Like, this will happen. Okay, so Q does more damage to champions, doesn't have the Q2 slow, can't be cast while dashing with E2. So there was wave clear, but more PvP damage. Is this ability weaker overall? Yes. This ability is generally, I would say, weaker overall. If you were landing Q2, you get 50 damage instead of a 2-second long slow. That's debatable, but the wave clear is down, the recastability is down, and the cooldown is worse. This ability is weaker. This is debatable, this is weaker. All right, what about W? Well, as we talked about, the attack resets are gone, it's just pure attack speed now. The damage is up by a 0.2 AP ratio, and the cooldown scales with rank better. However, you don't get the bonus damage to enemies, but your bonus healing is a lot better, but the mana cost goes up. Okay, so damage higher, but no damage amp. Cooldown better, healing better, but mana cost worse. Okay, so it is a strictly better defensive tool, and a frequently better offensive tool, debatable, hard to know, but you have mana constraints. All right, so here is the cooldown before and after, and meaningful, by the way, going down to 8 seconds here. I mean, yeah, we lost 1 second here, 5 becomes 6, but 12 becomes 8. Yeah, and this is like a decent ability, right? 205 with a 0.85 AP ratio. That's a strong damage ability, and it's reliable. It always hits. Yeah, again, this ratio change cannot make up for this, but this only happened sometimes. And the really big kicker, oh, and we'll do the cost real quick, right? Very substantial cost difference, very substantial, right? I mean, rank 1 is obviously a lot, and rank 5 is a ton. Now, I want to point something out about this ability, by the way. The damage scales up a lot with rank, right? It, like, roughly triples. The healing only roughly doubles with rank. And in general, most abilities more than triple in damage as you rank them up. So Kingslayer, outside of cooldown, which is now a more important rank up incentive, but Kingslayer has pretty weak level up incentives, right? The damage level up is mediocre and the healing level up is quite bad. Relative to other abilities, again, relative to other abilities. So you only really care if you really care about the cooldown change, but that means that you're adding a lot to the mana cost. So there is a chance W goes to being maxed last. Again, there is more incentive to rank it up because of this, but there's less incentive because of that, and as I'll look in a second, the E level up incentive also went up. So there is a chance we see this change. And having a 70 mana cost nuke with a 0.85 AP ratio, pretty doable. But we didn't talk about the healing yet, so let's talk about the healing, right? Instead of 75% more, if he's below 40%, it heals more based on health up to 100%. So I'm going to assume that it's linear, because I don't know otherwise. Well, here is the old values, 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%, and then, wait, why is this 50%? 75%, okay, I'm trolling, sorry. Let's be less crap. All right, there we go. Still really, really meaningful, right? And most of it, of course, comes in when you're kind of a little hurt, you're middling hurt. But like at 70% health, it's a 1.5x heal. That's great. That's super appreciable, super usable. And basically the balance change here is that, well, yes, the healing is increased, but the mana cost is so much higher that even if you were healing for 1.5x, I mean, you're spending more than 1.5 the mana, so your health per mana isn't going up. I mean, even in the most extreme, 83% more healing at exactly half. I mean, yeah, at rank 1, when you're at exactly half HP, your health per mana is better. Otherwise, your health per mana is worse. So maybe don't so much. Okay, so health per mana is down in this ability. But health per cast is definitively up. Damage per cast is arguable. And the cooldown is better if you rank it. probably a slightly stronger ability, but it really depends on mana constraints. If you're getting blue buffs, I think it's just definitely a better ability. If you are going Proto Belt and only one Doran's Ring, you're going to have a hard time sustaining W spam, so we'll see. And again, there's a really good chance this ability just sits as a 1-point wonder, but because the empowered healing is easy to reach, like I want to point out, right, like this is essentially what rank 5 W healed you for. Like you're getting those numbers back for free by just casting it at, 2/3 or half HP or whatever. So that's like the really big gain here, right? This does a lot here. But you have worse mana costs. But it lets you max your E second, which we'll go into now. As we mentioned, there's no more attack resets. Those are all going away. Sure, whatever. But let's talk about it. The damage goes from 70 to 130 to 80 to 280. And the AP ratio goes from 0.2 to 1. That's 5x the AP ratio, obviously. And keep in mind, we got 0.2 AP here. We got 0.05 AP here. We got 0.8 AP here. So we just added 1.05 to the offensive AP ratio of this champion. And realistically, right, you're pressing E twice and W once, which means you're getting this 3 times. We've added 1.15 to the AP ratio of the champion. That's a lot. This cannot be overlooked. This is an absurd amount of extra AP ratio to offensive damage output. Late game Sylas with AP is going to be doing a whole lot of stuff. I like this kind of change. It pushes them away from tank builds. I don't want to see tank builds on Sylas. I want to see AP builds on Sylas. Really, really, really meaningful. 150 damage gained on max rank E. Cooldown incentive has been added. Again, ratio 0.8 added as well. Of course, the big deal is you lose the shield. You lose the shield. Now you get that back somewhat in his overall durability, right? If you simply turn this into these base stats, it gets close. Now, want to point out, the early game is a lot weaker. You lost the 80-point shield in the early game, and you lost the base stats in the early game. He is certainly a weaker laner. That is definitively true. But his late game is as tanky. If you get there, he is as tanky and also does more damage. So he's being pushed toward being a late game threat. I'm fine with that. I think it's reasonable to do. I don't mind Sylas being a late game threat. Sounds fun. But massive, massive damage gain. And hey, a cooldown buff goes down to 10 seconds. That's reasonably quick. So here's the damage before and after. Obviously, again, more than doubles. The shield, right? It went up to 220. Now, keep in mind that Sylas was going to be on 1 pointless ability for most of his life. So if we aren't changing skill order, we're getting 10 damage and losing 80 shield. Right? So if we aren't changing our skill order on Sylas, this ability is very obviously weaker. The only gain being this 0.8 AP ratio, right? You're not getting the cooldown change, you're getting the AP ratio, and that's kind of it. One thing that is nice is you are locked out for less time. So once it lands, right, 0.05 seconds when moving after abduct, you get okay. You can start moving a bit more quickly. That's good. Cool. All right. This might be very underrated. I don't know how to quantify this. I don't know how important it's going to be, but this probably shouldn't be overlooked. This is a strict buff, of course. Definitely should matter. So all in all, weaker early game, stronger late game, way higher AP ratios, more health per cast of W, more healing per second on W, less healing per mana. Overall, more damage. So, the ways in which he is tanky have moved around a lot. There's a really good chance you're going to max E second because E's rank ups seem better than W's rank ups now, especially with the scaling mana cost. That's going to be pretty rough. So now he's going to be a much more mobile, right? Land the E, send him to land the Q. And he's going to be a lot burstier. He's going to be a much heavier damage champion. And we'll see what comes out of it. It's going to be really interesting. I'm really not sure where he's going to end up. In general, with changes this big, I expect a day 1 win rate drop, but I feel like he's going to end... Maybe he does end up lower win rate overall. Like, because Q is objectively weaker, but maybe there's just enough in the passive having attack speed that I'm really not appreciating enough that just his passive is going to be so much more usable that you're really going to see gains there. Like, I think that's the sleeper. If there's one thing that really makes him super strong, it's going to be this. And even this matters too. Because you can't always get use out of your stacks. So, like, and this might be what really makes him a stronger champion overall. And we'll see what happens. We might get there. I still like the changes. I like the idea of the changes at the very least. Next up, Varus gets 2 seconds off his Q cooldown, but 1 second less per blight stack, meaning this is weaker if you're popping 3 stacks, the same or better with less. Cool. So they're making Poke Varus better, which is a good thing. I like Poke Varus. I like Lethality Varus. He's fun to play. Small buff. I mean, we're definitely pretty much only seeing on-hit Varus, so I'm glad that there's like a couple changes trying to push them back towards equilibrium. Again, I talked about this earlier in the video. The idea of having multiple build orders, and even multiple build paths be similarly viable. I like this. That's cool. Vi is going to be unstoppable for the entirety of the ultimate. That's a good thing here as well. I like that. You can't, because like that was the timing, right? It's like I would play Tristana into Vi, and if I was like really on my game, I would start the R cast right as she reached me. I get the quarter-second animation. She does the like somersault over, and then Buster shot away. Can't do that anymore. I think that's totally fine, totally reasonable to do. I think this is a good change for Vi. I'm happy to have ultimates with long animations remain unstoppable. I'm generally pretty positive on this, so good change. Zyra now has a stacking slow on her E if you can summon 2 plants per E. 50% slow is really noticeable. 30 becoming 25 is not super noticeable. It's not going to be that big of a deal. That number was already higher than Riley's anyway, so it's not going to do all that much in Riley's builds. It doesn't like affect Riley's builds, I guess I should say. But 50% slow if you can land 2 different E plants. That is a really, really, really meaningful move speed difference. That's going to get you some extra hits. It is for sure going to get you some extra hits. Like I really do think this can mean a lot. It's still a pretty small, subtle part of the kit. You're still going to have plenty of times where only 1 E hits, and you're only going to get the weaker slow. I don't think this is an overall. I don't think this is an overall power up to the champion, but I think it's still cool. Again, I like the change. I think the change is interesting, and I still really like Zyra, so sounds good. Next up, changes to support items. In general, I actually have not found that supports were too weak, but I remember when we did this, all the support item looks in the previous patch rundown when they came out. Overall laning power level of support items did go down I think in terms of baseline stat efficiency and in terms of their passive not having an actual combat effect. So I like that rank 1 and rank 2 of the items have a thing, like to just have a strict buff onto them. And then I also like rank 3 of the items being a bit more specific to their stat line. Like it does feel bad getting 40 ability power on Tahm Kench. Like it does. It just it feels silly. So I'm glad it's constrained a little bit. I'm glad there's some. Honestly, I think it's satisfying to have a little bit more go into the ability. I think there's something nice about that, but I do like it being constrained down to like 25 or so. And so, okay, 25, 50, 100 health regen, but to make rank 3 about as gold efficient, minus 15 ability power. Similar stuff for the attack damage version. And then for the tribute line, it's mana regen 25, 50. And then when we get the 100, it's 10 attack damage and 50 health. Again, not so much HP on the items. To try to differentiate them a little bit, but also, again, having to siphon AP off to make room for the extra mana regen, because the rank 3 items were very efficient, and the rank 1 and 2 weren't very. So here is the table. Here is Relic Shield before and after. And what have we got here for ourselves? Well, 47 became 66% gold efficiency. That feels a bit more reasonable. You are still weaker than the average champion, because you're sitting there basically relying on gold income. And you don't get a full item when everyone else has like a Doran's Shield or a Doran's Blade or whatever else. You're sitting here on a weaker than average item. Rank 2 the ability, though, is, to be fair, a really respectable 160% gold efficient. that's awesome. So like once you got your first quest in, you're super in there. I mean, you really are gaining a lot of extra stat value. It's a strict buff of 50% more health regen. That's going to be felt. It's going to be noticed. That's going to be a big thing. And then you go up to max rank, and it's really pretty similar 400%, which is fine. I think that's chill. And really want to point out that, like, again, if you're Tahm Kench or Braum, I would take this trade every single time. Absolutely. So like, even if gold efficiency says it's about the same or lower, if you're the kind of champion who's buying Relic Shield, you'll take the health regen in basically all cases. So this is essentially a strict buff. Tank supports got outright stronger. That is just like a fact. And then we have the mana version. I do want to point out that there is still, right, 47, 66. And then over here it's 50 and 81. Yeah, the tribute versions are still more gold efficient. Now, I actually think it's okay to do. So the tribute versions are more gold efficient, but I want to point out a couple things. Their gold income is riskier. So you are, you are in threat when earning gold through these items, but that's okay. You can opt into the pattern, obviously. But the other thing that I think is a little bit understated is Spoils of War guarantees CS tier 80 carry. Right? So when I'm Tahm Kench or Braum or whatever, and I just smack the cannon minion, I guarantee that my Silver 2 Ashe teammate, aka me, doesn't miss the cannon. So there's actually like outright value in the Relic Shield passive. So I think it's completely defensible to have that line of items be less gold efficient because it does things that Tribute can't. And so, but regardless, we have these very efficient items, right, with the 81% gold efficiency. Mana regen, by the way, costs more than health regen, so that's part of that here. Right, 191% here at rank 2 because, yep, lots of stats, beautiful stuff. And then again, fairly similar efficiency of about 400% here at rank 3 of the item. AP down by 15, health down by 50, but it's 500 gold worth of mana regen. Now, I personally didn't feel like I was running out of mana that often on mage or enchanter supports. I didn't feel like I was running out on Lulu, Nami, Zyra, Brand, etc. I didn't play all these champions very much, but like in playing League during the offseason, I haven't felt like I'm seeing my supports or myself or the opposing supports run out of mana. So I'm not sure exactly how much of this matters at rank 3. Now I think at rank 1 and rank 2, I mean, they're obviously strict buffs. It's stats for nothing. And you were constrained some. So this actually does have some meaning here. It's the rank 3 where I'm not sure it's a strict buff. Like in the case of Bulwark of the Mountain, strict buff. Better item. I would make this trade every single day of the week. In this case, I'm not so sure. And that's all I'm going to say, right? Is late game mage supports, and the same is true for the attack damage version here as well with Black Mist Scythe. This is maybe not as beneficial. Conqueror now shows total healing on the tooltip. That's cool. Omni Stone gets a strict buff. Cooldown goes from 7 to 3 to 5 to 3, and for range, 11 to 7 becomes 9 to 7. Now, I'm making some assumptions on the leveling. So this and this is accurate, right? This is the old level scaling of the things. I am assuming that the way it worked, right, it was flat 7, then flat 6, then 5, scaling down with 0.25 per level. I'm assuming they just took this and scaled it up. I'm assuming that this is the buff, and this is the buff, which matters, right? Your first 9 levels, Omni Stone is better. The laning phase pattern of the rune is better. I think this is probably, I think I said it last time as well, to be fair. I think this rune's good enough to use. I think it's good enough to use in a lot of cases that we're not thinking of. So one thing that I noticed using it in an ARAM recently was it reminded me of the logic where if you get a new keystone, and you're not in combat, and you're not near any enemy champions, you get Predator. Hey, junglers, every time you recall, you're not in combat with enemy champions and not near any enemy champions. It's pretty reliable to get Predator from Omni Stone. I'm going to go so far as to say I am pretty sure that if you want to be a Predator user, just try running Omni Stone instead. Because you're not beholden to the actual Predator cooldown. You just get Predator whenever it decides to give you Predator. And with a 5-second cooldown on Predator, or on Omni Stone, you can do a Predator gank, and then if your fight is longer than 5 seconds, which it often can be, you just get Electrocute. That seems pretty usable. So I would urge you to try Omni Stone this patch. Some bug fixes, upcoming skins and chromas, cool stuff here. TLDR 10.1, welcome to the new season. Sets coming out, looks super sweet. Let's talk about stuff. Aphelios, incredibly squishy and very slow. Now his damage is still going to be extremely high, but he is supremely catchable and killable. Assassins should theoretically, and especially AP assassins, his MR is below average. Should be the way you stop this guy. Blow up a magic damage. He can't get away from you. Try to do that. Aurelion Sol, small early game nerf. Still going to be OP, by the way. Aphelios also still going to be OP. Azir going to get a small buff here. Big deal in the rank 2 of the ability. Gets 75 more damage on the ultimate. Small buff here. Shouldn't be taking over pro play. Should be a little better in solo queue. Good to see. Corki getting 0, 10, 20 damage on the R. Matters a little bit. Go you. Jax might not be able to afford Rageblade in his builds because he needs tank stats, but hey, if you go for the greed build, good luck. Late game to mid game Jayce damage buff. Definitely weak in solo queue. Not seeing much pro play. I'm about it. Kalista's getting a lot of baseline durability added to her late game. Definitely seems to need it, right? She doesn't have good ways of navigating late game team fights, so I like that they're going with late game durability being the buff. I think it fits the kinds of things Kalista needs to succeed, so I'm a fan of the change, and I'll probably play some Kalista this season. 5 move speed on Kassadin will not stop him from being OP. It's a nice change to see, but he's definitely going to be overpowered. Rift Walk and Living Artillery show the mana debuff duration on the ulti icon itself. Shout out your boy. I suggested it and it got in. I'm sure someone else did as well, but I was the change in the world that we all needed to see. Mordekaiser getting nerfs that are probably too small. He will still be probably OP as well, but levels 6 and onwards, he's going to move less fast during the passive. And hey, sometimes you can manage to kite him long enough that it turns off. This will have an impact. He will still be OP. Nami's E now works on spells. There's going to be some really fun interactions at some point down the line. Your Ziggs ult is going to slow. Cassiopeia can just like E, get some damage out of that one as well, combined with a slow to make her Q land really for free. Like, there's going to be some really big power here out of this. I think there's going to be some really cool lane matchups that come out of this. 5 health on Sejuani lets her go back to buying Warmog's second item. But they are buffing the armor and MR builds on her, and they're also buffing Emax second. They're not expecting Emax second to actually be the best build, but if people are doing it, that they'll be less bad while doing it. So I like that. Shyvana now gets to scale with Cloudrick a little bit, and a pretty meaningful damage buff to her E on hit damage. This is 15% more damage for any champion, and any monster with less than 3,077 health. If it has more than 3,077 health, it is up to 50% more damage on the on-hit. Good times. Sylas is squishier early, tankier later. The passive no longer has attack resets on it, but it gains a lot of attack speed that will make it close-ish to the same usability. Now, ideal case with attack resets, obviously the resets are better. Non-ideal cases, this can be stronger. It also stacks a third time. It also executes minions. It also does more damage, but the AoE is smaller, which can certainly be relevant. Q is an overall weaker ability. The cooldown is longer. The damage is slightly higher, but not to minions. But if you were going to land Q2, and you do get your extra damage out of it, you don't get the slow out of Q2. Q2 slow is gone. I would argue that Q is an overall weaker ability as a result. W has worse mana cost, but way better healing. It doesn't have the W execute damage, but the ratio is higher and the cooldown is better. So W is about the same to maybe slightly stronger ability overall. E, if it is a 1-point wonder, is a weaker ability because it is gaining 10 damage. It's the same cooldown at rank 1, and it loses the shield. But if you're going to max E, you're going to get the rest of this, you get this 0.8 AP ratio, which is, nothing to scoff at, and 150 bonus damage, and 4 seconds off the cooldown. Emax second is probably the right build. If it's not, I think Sylas is definitively weaker because losing the shield outright and getting very little back does not make this ability stronger. But Emax second is probably totally doable. I think it's going to be pretty strong. I think this will work out well for him. I think this is a cool ability. 10-second cooldown, really high damage, really high ratio. I think this could be sweet. And then R no longer has attack reset. I like the changes. I don't think he's going to land stronger on day one, but I think with Emax second, he might end up stronger overall. Varus is slightly better at Qmax poke builds. You would need 3 blight stacks to make this a nerf, and most Qs are not with 3 blight stacks on, especially with poke builds. So a buff to poke Varus. Sounds good. Vi unstoppable for all of R. I like it. Zyra has more slow if you can get 2 E plants in the same target. Not going to happen all the time. And 1 plant is going to be weaker, but it seems cool. I think it's cool. I like this. I think it's a fun change. 2 plants stacking 50% is going to be a lot of slow. Next up, Relic Shield, Targon's Buckler, and Bulwark are all getting strictly stronger. On any reasonable Relic Shield user, I would always trade 15 AP for 100% health regen. Same for 9 AD. So strict buff to tank supports. As far as range supports are considered, losing 10 attack damage and 50 health for 100% mana regen is more debatable. Now, the landing phase is certainly stronger. This mana regen buff is really, really nice. It's really valuable. I like it a lot. I think it's super good. But the max rank of these items, I'm not sure I'd take the trade. So you might, this arguably nerfs late game mage and caster type champions. But, to the tune of 15 AP, it's fine. Honestly, it's fine. All right, next up we have Omni Stone getting a 2-second cooldown reduction in the early game for both melee and ranged champions. Here's the list. Pretty sure this is accurate. Seems good. I like this. I like Omni Stone. I think it's a cool keystone personally. I like using it. I like trying it. I think it's fun. I really urge you to try it on junglers. To get Predator for your ganks and then have a real keystone when you're doing Dragon Team fights. I think it'll look good. All right, that's it for the patch rundown. Thanks for watching. Over an hour long. We're back at it. See you next time.